welcome to another episode of Culture Cast with Dustin Homan. Today, Dustin's featured guest is a especially unique individual who went to Antarctica with the 4-H group, and I look forward to having Dustin talk with Natalie Miller. Stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Culture Cast with Dustin Homan. Dustin brings in many different unique students at the Ohio State University. He's the program manager for the Special Programs 4-H, in which he has an opportunity to talk with many different students who have gone throughout the globe. This is my favorite show in the fact that he brings in those students who have had an opportunity to see another culture. And when he mentioned Antarctica, I'm thinking, well, I need to get on my coat because it's probably real cold up there. So, Dustin, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Patrick.
It is always a pleasure talking with you. This is one of the first times I ever had an opportunity to listen to somebody from Antarctica.
Yeah, me too. I was just telling Natalie, my guest, that on the way over this morning, I was telling my wife about this Culture Cast, and she said, "Where did Natalie go?" And I said, "Antarctica." And her immediate response was, "On purpose?" So I think this is amazing because, you know, we've been trying to circumvent the globe and visit as many different countries on as many different continents. And now I think this will be the 7th continent. Although we haven't really touched too much on Asia yet, but Antarctica is a very unique place, and it's November almost. I'm counting down to the days to Christmas. The Polar Express is one of my favorite. Everything is just coming to a confluence here. And so without further ado, let me introduce my guest that I have with me this morning.
Great.
Natalie Miller. Natalie is a senior here in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences at Ohio State. She's majoring in Agribusiness and Applied Economics with minors in History and International Development. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. To get things started, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What activities were you involved in before you came to Ohio State?
Sure. Dustin gave a little bit about what I'm involved in now, but to talk a little bit about what I've been involved in the past, I'm a former 4-H member and a former FFA member. I'm from Washington Courthouse, Ohio. I went to high school at Miami Trace High School, and I grew up on a corn and soybean farm. So that transitioned naturally into me studying agribusiness and applied economics at Ohio State.
Did you consider any other universities?
I didn't. This is the only place I
what I like to hear. And tell the viewers what you're thinking about doing once you graduate.
Sure. After I graduate, I'm interested in going to law school. And right now I'm in the application phase, but my plan is to know what I'm doing after I graduate by February. So I'm also applying for jobs, and we'll see where I end up.
I always love hearing the stories of our guests, and especially I hope that they're encouraging for our young viewers that are watching, that no matter where you're from, rural, urban, suburban, whatever your background is, there are amazing opportunities to not only pursue some incredible careers, for instance, possibly being a lawyer, but also some amazing opportunities to travel around the world through the resources that different universities offer. So Antarctica. Let's dig into this. Natalie has some amazing photos that I want to be sure that we get to. Let's kick things off the way we always do with a map. So not much to see here on this map. A lot of blue ocean and a big white surface that you see there, and that is Antarctica. So this is a view from the bottom or the south end of our globe. A little bit of background about Antarctica. It is the 5th largest continent in size, and now that I think about that, 5 out of 7, it's really not too dramatic. in terms of size, right? So it's really the second smallest continent. However, it is the highest continent of all of the others. So that's interesting. I think you'll see that in some of Natalie's photos. It is a place where no one is allowed to settle it. So there was a treaty signed by 12 different nations called the Antarctic Treaty, and it has since been adopted by others. But it ensures that Antarctica is preserved for non-military scientific pursuits. And Natalie's going to tell us a little bit about some of what she saw and some of the things going on there. It also has 90% of the world's total ice. There is a great marketing plug for trying to get tourism to come to Antarctica. Come visit 90% of the world's ice. And Natalie got to do it. So let's dig into some of these photos. Dwayne, if you'll transition us into our first photo. Natalie, first of all, tell us about this trip. So what was the purpose of it? Why'd you sign up for it?
Yes. So I had found out that the university, Ohio State's College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Sciences, was beginning a program to Antarctica. And this was the second year that students had gone. The first year, the second year students had gone. The first year, an educator went as a kind of a pilot program to make sure it was safe. Then the first year for students, a few students went from all across the university. And then after that, that was the year I went. So there were 5 students from Ohio State, about 15 students from other universities. So it was coupled with an international provider that works with a lot of universities across the United States. That was a really good networking opportunity to meet other students. I forget how many universities were represented, but quite a few. I really appreciated that. And that made for about 20 people. And then on top of that, I want to say there were around 150 people on the ship. So that means that 130 of these people were just going to Antarctica for their vacation.
Oh my gosh. Well,
which I thought was neat.
Until you were telling me earlier, you got to meet a really unique individual who worked for a very famous magazine on the trip, right? So tell the viewers about that.
There was a photographer from National Geographic magazine on the ship, and he works with the tour company quite a bit, and I think goes on some different tours with them. But that was awesome, and he had seen some really neat places, and so I appreciated interacting with the other students, but also interacting with the other passengers on board and the other staff members, because they had lived really interesting lives.
And Natalie has a photo of the ship that you were on.
Yes,
correct?
Yes.
And Dwayne, if you would be willing to jump to that, I know it's a little out of order, but while you were on that topic, as Dwayne finds that photo, tell us about how did you get there?
Yes. So first, we flew to the very southern tip of South America. So it was Ushuaia in Argentina. So it's kind of in the Patagonia Mountains or just south of that, and it's considered a gateway city to Antarctica. And there are a couple gateway cities around the world. Cape Town, South Africa is one of them, and then some people, I'm almost positive, get to Antarctica through New Zealand. So there are some other ways that you can get to the world's southernmost continent, but we chose to do it through Ushuaia. So after flying there, it was about around 36 hours of flying, not necessarily up in the air, but travel time. And then on top of that, we boarded the ship, and it took 2 days to get to Antarctica. You would think 2 days on a ship, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible, but it was not bad. There was a little bit of seasickness, but there was a nurse or a doctor on board that helped remedy all of that. And then the whole way down, there were lectures about everything we would see in Antarctica. So there was a bird expert, an ice expert, because 90% of the world's ice is in Antarctica. I think her official title is a glaciologist. Ooh. And so there were all these different scientists on the ship that were showing us all of this wildlife. And every time they would have a wildlife sighting, they would say, "Everyone come out," and they would announce it across the ship. And I remember one time everyone came out to the deck of the ship as we were moving, and we saw a seal and a penguin like sniffing each other out. It was hilarious. So there was some really neat things that we saw, and that was our home. It was an old research vessel. Okay. So it was owned by a Russian ship company, but operated by a Canadian tour company. So a lot of cultures were intersecting on board, which was neat.
So let's go to our next photo.
Yeah, just a quick question. When you were coming by boat, did you see a lot of the land mass? And my second question is basically, is Antarctica primarily land with ice on top? Or is it similar to Arctic, where it's just a mass of ice?
That that is the big difference between the Arctic and Antarctica, because Antarctica is land with ice on top, and it's the highest and driest continent. Because the Arctic isn't necessarily a continent, but Antarctica is its own land mass. So we could see some of that, but sometimes there would be precipitation coming down or a little bit of fog, or it wasn't necessarily clear, but we could definitely see the sheets of ice around it. So it has a lot of ice around its perimeter before you get to the actual continent. And the body of water we were crossing is called the Drake Passage, and it's considered to be the most dangerous and most tumultuous chunk of water that any ships go through. So that's why I mentioned the seasickness. I wanted to follow up on that.
Did they warn you about this before?
They did. They said, sign me up.
Well, let's get to some of Natalie's other photos, and I think back to Patrick's question, you can see a little bit in this photo that kind of mixture, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about this photo.
Yes, here you can see the mixture of land and then mountains. And this is a really unique photo because if you notice in the left-hand corner, there's a penguin. And wait, is that it's so little? That's a person. I apologize. That is a person. But penguins kind of do the same thing because the snow is so thick. And so we were kind of imitating the behavior of penguins as we walked and making these highways. But as we were making our human highways in the snow, it was important that we didn't disrupt the penguin highways, which were kind of close by, because if penguins saw a footprint in their penguin highways, they wouldn't walk in it. So they penguins weigh, I think, around 40 pounds on average. And that's, I'm a little bit rusty on all my Antarctic trivia, but that's what sticks out to me. And here you can see how a penguin has worn into the snow a little bit. And they do that as they walk. And so as humans, we had on big boots, and it was really quite a workout with that deep snow. But we did have someone who accidentally stepped in a penguin highway while they were walking. And they didn't mean to, it was an accident. But a penguin kind of looked at it and then walked away and then looked again and thought, I don't think that's from my people. So it has to be a whole new penguin highway. So that's why it was so important, because penguins, they worked to get all their food, and then they had to expend all that extra energy making a new highway. So that was just a really neat thing to see. Although it wasn't ideal for that one penguin or that group that were moving, it was good to see the impact of why you shouldn't step in them, or why you should be very careful to avoid them.
Penguins at the Arctic, right? Also, or is it the penguins just in the Antarctic?
I think just the Antarctic.
Oh, that's interesting.
So did they kind of cluster together in colonies like I've seen on TV?
You could definitely smell them.
Oh.
Yes, when they were clustered together. Yeah, you could tell that you were approaching a big cluster of penguins. So you can see here, they're all kind of, in that previous picture, they're all kind of together, and there's some pictures where they're gathering on rocks. And here they're on an ice shelf, and they were very athletic and agile. They would jump off the ice shelf to get food and then jump right back up.
That's amazing.
And it was awesome to see.
So their primary food, of course, is fish, correct? Mm-hmm. And so they jump into the water, get their fish, and then jump back out.
Yes, that's what they do.
Do you know what type of penguin?
There were a lot of different types we saw. Gentoos, and I'm trying to think of the other names, but there were a couple different ones. But there was definitely one that was the most prominent, and I don't want to get the name wrong, so I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, no worries. It kind of almost reminds me of the behaviors you see from geese here, how they fly in a V shape for aerodynamics. We're talking about these highways. So, I mean, they kind of work. Do they work together to push through the snow?
They all kind of move in a row. Yeah, in one of those pictures, they're moving together. And sometimes you'll see a penguin moving alone or trying to walk through the highway alone, and that's okay because you can kind of see that their group is back there. Their tribe is right there backing them up. And
any chance while you were there, it was, in their mating season, so where you would have saw like any baby penguins?
I didn't see any baby penguins, no.
So,
I wish I could have.
Yeah, in terms of wildlife, you had the penguins, and there's also a photo that you have here where we can see a glimpse of the end of a different animal popping out of the ocean. So tell us about that. Dwayne, there's a photo with a group on the left-hand side, and then you can see a fin popping out of the water towards the middle of the photo. So as he finds this one, tell us about this photo.
Yeah, so I was in Antarctica over Christmas 2 years ago, and our Christmas Eve activity was whale watching. And I thought, sure, we'll see some whales in Antarctica, but I didn't imagine, I just couldn't fathom until seeing them how big these whales would be and how unafraid of the boats around them they would be. So the little boats that we took off the ship to make our continental landings were called Zodiacs. And I'm sure if you were a whale swimming, you could see that there is something that's not normally there in your water. But they almost were putting on a show, and you could see them kind of stick their heads out of the water, and really they were smiling. You could see their teeth. I think they were trying to get food, but I'm telling myself they were smiling. And then they would dive back in, and that's when you would see their tail.
Now, are those killer whales?
No, not killer whales.
Oh, okay.
Thank goodness. There were some people on the ship who elected to kayak. When we would make continental landings on the Zodiac, they kayaked. And I was a little bit afraid of that because kayaks are a little bit smaller than whales. And one of the whales came awfully close to the kayaks, and they kind of had to ride the wave that came a bit. And there are some photos that were in the end of the trip slideshow that capture that. It looked very scary.
This is such an amazing story that you're telling. Before we started recording, we were talking about how you were there over Christmas, and I'm sure you missed your family, right, as part of that. However, how many of us can say that over a Christmas of whatever 2017, 2016, I was out whale watching in the Antarctic? I mean, this is such an amazing once in a lifetime opportunity. So I want to get into some of these photos of just how you functioned. Like, how did you live while you were on this study abroad? And we got some photos of you in a sleeping bag. And tell us it ain't true. Did you sleep on the continent?
I did sleep on Antarctica for one night. The other nights we were sleeping on the ship because we were visiting a lot of different sites throughout the Antarctic Peninsula. So we would move throughout the evening and early morning and then wake up first thing and be there. But in one of our continental landings, we had sleeping bags, and we slept on Antarctica overnight. And it was like you would see in a wilderness movie, and I'm not that outdoorsy, but we had to dig our little holes in the snow, pack it down, and then within your sleeping bag, you had a cover on the outside to keep you dry, and then a little bit of one of those thermal cushions that kind of reflected your heat back on you, a sleeping bag. So there were a lot of precautions in place, but in hindsight, I should have worn another pair of socks because I remember waking up the next day and thinking, oh my gosh.
But
is the
yes.
And you slept.
I did.
You were able to fall asleep. That is just so amazing.
So the sun, was this during the period of time where it was primarily 24 hours of sunlight?
Yes, it was primarily 24 hours of sunlight. You could kind of see the sun going down behind the mountains at one point, but it never fully went away. I remember the guides woke us up at 5 in the morning, and I thought, it's 5 in the morning? It feels like 9 a.m. because it was
the reverse of that I would assume there are periods maybe during like our summer months where it's just completely dark. Most of the time.
And there are scientists in Antarctica during that time. Sometimes. We never went to the South Pole, but we did go to a research center. It was a British research center, and it was home to the world's southernmost gift shop. And some people, there were women who lived there for long periods of time. I don't think they lived there through the winter, but nonetheless, I think that would get lonely in a little bit. You would almost lose your sense of time.
Yeah.
It's daylight all the time.
Were there in like the North Pole or in Alaska where we have the Inuit Indians, the Eskimos, are there indigenous people on the Antarctic?
No, not that I know of.
Oh, okay. And primarily, from what you said earlier, treaties have been signed to where no one specific country owns they have slivers of lands that they can do research on, but no one owns anything of Antarctica.
Yes, it's all for scientific purposes.
And just out of curiosity, you know, the North Pole, the Arctic Ocean, there's concerns about global warming and things of that nature. Was there concerns in the Antarctic, you know, since it has 90% of the ice?
Yes, there definitely were concerns, and I think it's really moving after seeing a continent that's completely or almost completely untouched by humans. It's really eye-opening to see what human interactions with the environment can do and how they can damage our Earth. So it has made me more mindful after I've came back to the United States about those things. But additionally, the research project that my group was doing while we were on the trip, the group of students, the 20, were split into two groups, and I was in the group that researched if Antarctic tourism is actually helping or hurting the ecosystem. So do people go to Antarctica and have this eye-opening experience and then come home and want to save the Earth? Or are all the emissions that you rack up while you're flying and taking a ship and putting footprints and walking in penguin highways, are those consequences more detrimental to the environment than the things you do after you get home? And we didn't find an answer to that, just because it's such a complex issue, and we only had about a 5-day period of actually being on Antarctica to examine that. But we did write a group paper that was pretty thought-provoking and walked through all of the issues that weigh into that.
Well, that's fantastic. You know, Dwayne was looking through some of the other pictures. You know, maybe we can, you know, as time is starting to get short, maybe we can just go through a number of the different pictures, and maybe you want to comment on.
Yeah, and let's specifically some of those landscapes. Yeah, I think those are just absolutely gorgeous. So
this is also from whale watching, and this was taken from one of those boats. So one of the smaller Zodiac boats that look like blow-up boats. So it's a little precarious when you're close to whale. I mean, I'm sure it's perfectly safe, but in my mind, I thought, I don't know what we're getting into here, but. Anyway, there's a whale with some mountains in the background, and it was amazing to watch.
Did you see any green? I'm
glad you asked that. Yes, there were lichens there, and that's the only kind of vegetation that grows in Antarctica. And maybe you'll be able to see some of it on that rock. They take thousands of years to grow and really mature. So that was another thing that was very important, not to step on the lichens, because it's the only vegetation in Antarctica. So typically they were on rocks, and then here, this is a rock that some penguins were calling home, and that's the suit that we wore while we were there. The ship provided it to you, so you have your life jacket, and then your red official Antarctic jacket, and they also provided you with boots, which was nice to not have to travel with those.
And tell us about food real quickly. I mean, what did you eat?
Yes, the ship had all the food that we needed, and they cooked some really good meals, and that was prepared by the Russian staff. So that was neat, because it was a little bit of a different culture's food, not Antarctic culture's food, but still something that I had never thought about trying before. Yes, it was good.
So you kind of got a mix of different worlds, you know, some of this Russian influence, and then while you're on Antarctica. I wouldn't imagine that there's actually any like Antarctic food.
No.
Right. Okay.
None.
I don't think anyone's eating penguin.
No.
Hopefully not.
Heavens, no.
Okay.
That would be so simple.
I was going to ask the same question.
No penguin.
but you know, we always love different kinds of food. And what was your favorite? What did you like the most and wish you had the most of, even though it was from the ship?
There was all kinds of food that was really good. A lot of meat and potatoes. I remember Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, we had a dinner, and it was just so interesting, because I thought, this is similar to the Christmas dinner I would have at home, but I'm with all these people from around the world. So I would say that the Christmas dinner, just traditional food, was one of my favorites, because it made me feel like I was at home.
Specifically, there's a sunset photo or sunrise, or The sun never set. I'm not sure what would you call this?
I think it would be this photo. This is kind of in the middle of the day. Oh, that one. Yes, that is a sunset photo that was taken at about 11 p.m.
Wow. Now, Patrick was asking you this earlier. Did the sun ever fully go below the horizon?
No. As we got further north, it did. So when we were in Ushuaia, it would kind of dip down pretty close to that and get almost dusk-like. But it wasn't ever something where it was pitch black, which was really interesting. But we would see more of a sunset as we got further north.
Did you get an opportunity to interact with any of the researchers that were there actively doing research?
There were a lot of penguin counters on the ship. So we would get off. There were some researchers. I remember one was from Brazil. Some of them were from all over the world. And it's funded by different Antarctic research programs that the tour companies sponsored. And they would pay for these people to come and complete their research. So there was one person whose responsibility was every time we got off the ship to go hike and do fun things and whale watch, he would go to hike to these penguin colonies. Really, he had to climb a lot of mountains to do so. And he had a clicker and would just count all the penguins he saw and what variety they were. And that was really interesting, but I don't know if I want that job.
I know that there's a center, the Bird Polar Research Center here at Ohio State is globally renowned for the research that they're doing related to climate change and taking ice cores. Did you get to see anything like that while you were down there?
We didn't. We did learn about that in the pre-departure course. So prior to our groups of 5's departure for Antarctica, there was a course that we took at Bird Polar that helped enlighten us on all things going on in Antarctica and gave us a lot of background that we would appreciate the experience that much more.
Just a real quick question. The ice that you walked on, how deep was it to the actual landmass on an average?
On the area, we would see calving is what happens when an iceberg breaks off of a massive ice chunk, and we would see that from time to time. Actually, while we were sleeping on Antarctica, we could hear it overnight. You could hear the icebergs fall off, and so it was really thick. There is a picture in here that shows that, or shows the mass of the ice, that's how thick it is connected to the land. And this one,
there's a photo. It looks like it's taken out of a window on the ship. Is that where you took the photo? Okay.
So there you can see the edge of the ice. And so this was very thick. I don't even know how to begin estimating it. And just as the natural cycle of events, big chunks of ice would fall off and form icebergs, like the one in that other photo. And you could see those icebergs flip as time went on, which was really neat. Some groups got to experience it. And one of the other students who traveled on the group had a video on her Facebook page of this massive iceberg flipping, and I thought, I wish I could see that. And it creates waves, and if you're in the ship, or in the smaller boat, it's a really neat experience.
What causes that flip? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I think it's the change. As part of it's in the water, they just continue to move and form really neat shapes. So that's why some of them you see are look like arcs.
So, Natalie, one question I always like to ask people as part of this show is tell the viewers, why should they consider visiting Antarctica if they have the opportunity?
Everyone should consider visiting Antarctica if they have the opportunity. Actually, if someone has the opportunity to visit Antarctica, they should go because it's really an awesome thing to experience land that's mostly untouched by humans. And I never thought that when I entered college, I would be able to leave saying, I saw penguins in their natural habitat and I saw icebergs being formed. And it's a very neat experience in the landscape itself, but also the things you learn through interacting with other travelers who are just as interested in experiencing new cultures as you are.
And are you aware, are there opportunities for regular people
to
be able to get on there as well?
Yeah, the tour group was called One Ocean, and that's why there were some people on the ship who were just there for vacation over Christmas, taking family to Antarctica.
That's just amazing.
is fantastic. That's one of the things that I like about the Culture Cast programs is that you get to see all sorts of neat and interesting cultures, lands, ice. It's just fantastic. And I don't know about you, Dustin, but I probably will not go there for a while.
Yeah, I feel like I'd really need to be in the right mood for that. But you had said, you were telling us earlier when you were down there, what was the temperature?
It was just above freezing, or right around freezing the whole time. So very manageable, really not at all different from Ohio.
Yeah. Probably a little warmer than Ohio during like February and March. So
we were very active the whole time. So you don't even realize how cold it is when you're up and moving around. In fact, there were a lot of times when we all just took off our jackets and wore sweatshirts.
Hey, we're talking with Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is the program manager of the special 4-H programs. His guest is Natalie Miller. She went to Antarctica, and I always look forward to Culture Cast because it is a program that truly goes to different cultures. For Ohio State University South Centers, I'm Patrick. Thank you for watching.